Joining me now is Joe Tacopina, former attorney for Donald Trump. Joe, thanks for being with us tonight. A historic week, to say the least. Donald Trump has vowed to appeal his 34-count guilty verdict, which we'll get into shortly. But at his rambling 40-minute press conference yesterday, Trump blamed President Biden and his people, and he called them, along with New York Judge Juan Merchan, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, and his former lawyer Michael Cohen, who he would not name under the gag order against him. He's claiming that the trial was rigged, calling himself a political prisoner. Having represented Trump, please tell us what's going through his mind right now as you got to know him. What do you think he's thinking?
How is he going to use this as a campaign boost? That's the only thing he's thinking. I mean, he's clearly going to try and now use this as to form himself into some sort of a martyr, to try and position himself as a martyr and use this as someone who's been, politically attacked by his opponents and that the justice system has been politicized. That's how he's going to use it. That's what he's going to do. Look, Reverend, this is a bomb on the American political landscape. Make no mistake about it. But I also think there is a sliver of Americans who are undecided here. I think the people who are supporters of Donald Trump will be supporters of Donald Trump, whether he gets convicted in all four of his indictments. And just let that swivel around your brain when you say it a little bit. Our presidential candidate has 4 indictments, 1 conviction, or the people who are against him. Certainly, this is not doing anything to change that. So I just don't know at the end of the day what effect this is really going to have on the election. There's a sliver, perhaps, of undecided Americans who may say, you know what, I can't have a convicted felon as our president. Well,
Joe, we talking about 34 felonies he was found guilty of. They may go through, and he has the right to go through an appeals process, but tonight he has been found guilty of 34 felonies. And as you know, I've worked most of my life in civil rights, a lot of it in criminal justice cases with civil rights. I don't know anybody in the neighborhood I grew up with that walks around with 34 felony convictions. That is a lot. So aside from the election, what it does to the country and what it does to the perception of young people who are growing up that we tell to do the right thing. But let me go into this. In the last weeks of the trial, we watched several Republican lawmakers, including the House Speaker Mike Johnson, circle the wagons around Trump, visiting the courthouse here in Manhattan to show loyalty to their nominee. Since the verdict came down, many of those same lawmakers have doubled down on that support, calling for the Supreme Court to step in. Take a listen to what Johnson, Congressman Byron Donalds, and Senator Tim Scott have said since the conviction Thursday.
They might have a spring today, but it's not going to last very long because what happened in New York is a travesty of justice. Everybody knows it.
I can't believe the hoax, this sham, this absolute injustice justice system, weaponizing the justice system of the United States of America against a political opponent. Un-American. Joe Biden, you're fired.
I do believe the Supreme Court should step in. Obviously, this is totally unprecedented, and it's dangerous to our system. This will be overturned, guys. There's no question about it. It's just going to take some time.
What are your thoughts on what you just heard, Joe? And as I mentioned, they're just a few of the many of the Republican leaders.
Yeah, what I hear, like Tim Scott is someone I used to respect, but I sort of lost a lot of respect from what I just heard because he sounded so uneducated, unintelligent, and made no sense at all to say that, look, I understand there's a political motivation to a lot of what's going on in our country today. And everyone wants to sort of paint the broad brush and, this is a political vendetta and weaponization of the justice system. This is a state case. This is different than the Jack Smith cases, okay? This is not a federal prosecution. Joe Biden or anyone from his Justice Department have absolutely zero to do with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. They have no jurisdiction over him. They have no context with him. They have no control, certainly, over him. So to say that Joe Biden brought this case is one of the most ridiculous things I've heard. We know that's not the case. And even even Trump's lawyers know that's not the case. At
Now,
least
wait
who,
right there, because as you say, even Trump's lawyers know that's the case. You were an attorney with Trump. You were on Trump's case early and got off the case. So you're speaking as one that knew as you signed into work for Trump, which you explained on this show why, and you explained why you got out, that this had nothing to do with Joe Biden or any of the federal government trying to lean in on Donald Trump.
The federal government has no input on the Manhattan District Attorney. It's a state prosecution. So the federal government and Joe Biden cannot direct, command, request a state prosecutor to bring charges. They have absolutely no jurisdiction. The same way the president, be it Trump or Biden, cannot pardon anyone who's convicted of a state crime. That's only left to the governor of that particular state. You know, so people who say that make it scary that they really don't know the law or what they're talking about. I mean, to suggest that Joe Biden would be behind a Manhattan District Attorney's prosecution is silly. That's not the issue here. I mean, the issue here is, look, is this a case that would have been brought, Reverend, against anyone else other than Donald Trump? I still say the answer is probably no. I still say that because it's a case that really they had to put together a lot of different theories, a misdemeanor business records crime coupled with a sort of undescribed felony crime. And that's the part where there is some sort of powder in that gun where you could argue that, hey, this was done because it was him. But Joe Biden had nothing to do with this. And there's nothing about a political opponent being persecuted by the justice system in this case that you could argue.
Even if you think, as you stated, and I don't agree, but you stated that maybe it wouldn't have been brought against anyone else, you have to admit that Donald Trump's lawyers, his defense lawyers, laid that in front of the jury. The jury heard it. They even had the law read back, and a jury of his peers not only said, yes, it was a crime by voting guilty, they went with the decision and the charge of the judge that it was in the rights of this court to find Donald Trump guilty as a felon in these particular indictments. So I think that if people could argue, well, they didn't understand, the defense laid all that out, the judge charged it, and they reread it to the verdict before the verdict, and the jury still voted and disagreed with your assessment.
Well, it's not about disagreeing with my assessment. I didn't say they were wrong or whatever. All I simply says, I don't think this case would have been brought against someone else